Hi there, welcome to another, it's a standalone video, it's not part of a sequence particularly, but I'm returning to the TBM, the three position switch, this one here, the landing light, taxi light, off light. I did a previous video showing how to do it with just an ordinary event button, so that you could use the minimum of scripting. I was trying to do it without any scripting, just the minimum of scripting to make the button work. This one's a more complete video. I'm going to do it using a slider gauge so you can have some active graphics on the Stream Deck as well. So it's using X's and O's Stream Deck software as usual. You have to bear with me, I'm afraid. I've got a terrible cold and sore throat today, so I've turned the gain up a little bit on the microphone so that I don't have to speak too loudly, and you may hear me coughing and spluttering and having a sip of tea every now and then to keep the voice going. Anyway, let's explore firstly how the switch works, and then we'll talk about how to make it all work. I'll put chapter markers in this one. If you have seen my previous video, there may be some bits you want to jump over, so I'll see how it goes. Let's get into the cockpit and let's see what we're talking about. It's this switch here that we're talking about, and it's not controlled by any of the normal K events or AE variables particularly. So it's, as I've shown in other videos, best to use developer mode and go into look at the aircraft behaviors. And we need to load the interior. A tip for you, if this doesn't come up showing everything that it should do, just do a quick reload. Occasionally it misses that and you need to reload the aircraft. It's like restarting the flight. So a quick reload of that. I'm not going to look through the behaviors. It's the input events that seem to be the best place to look for this stuff. And in the lighting area, there is this section here, the lighting landing section. And these are, from experience, these are the B variables, the B vars that we're going to work with. So what we need to do really is to start exploring how it's working with this one. So using X's and O's, I'm going to watch the variable and see how that variable works. So watch the simulator variable. We can't select it, we've got to type it in. So we are saying it's a B variable, and it is lighting landing 1, and we'll add that. And it's showing that it's found the value of 2. And as we move this, 1 is taxi light and 0 is landing lights. So it's 2 and it's at the bottom, 1 and 0. So we've got control of that variable. We know how that works. And we need to find out actually what it does when you're in there. What it does is look for it controls the taxi and the landing light. So if we just put a filter on there for taxi, and we want to find the state of the taxi light, so we can add that into there, and it also affects the landing light. So if we again apply the filter, and we can drop that in here so we can have a look at that variable and watch it working. So I'll add that in there. So we've got 3 variables in there. Excuse me. So as we move through this switch here, it works pretty much as you'd predict, that when it's in taxi mode, the taxi light goes on, and when we flick up to there, this variable goes to 0 and this one goes to 1. So that looks like it's all totally achievable, dead easy to program. So let's move that out of the way, and if we bring in Stream Deck, what I want to do is to program that into my slider gauge. So if I drop that in here, and what I'm going to do is make the button work. So what I want to happen is when I press the button, I want it to move up 1. Remember, it starts at state 2, so I want it to go to state 1 and then to state 0 as I press that button in the normal way. So the variable that I wanted to do, sorry, not I want to read a variable. I want the button, when I press that, I want it to affect that B variable, the B var. And if we look here at this over here, I've got a landing light decrease and increase, and I want to decrease. I want it to start at 2, which is its default value, to go to 1, to go to 0. So let's put that back into the Stream Deck. And I don't think it's case dependent. Lighting, landing 1, and I want it to decrease. Try that again. Lighting, landing 1, decrease. So that should match that one there, and I need to send a 1 to it. But I also want it to move in the opposite direction. I want it to be able to go from 2 to 1. 0 to 1 to 2. So I want it to increase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the long press event to do that. So I'm going to put exactly the same thing in here, but the increase version. Lighting, landing 1, increase. Now we can't put a value in here, it is by default 1. There's nothing else we can do about that, it's built into it. I'm going to make it a little bit quicker. I'm going to make it so that it responds after half a second, and we submit that. So if we test that button now, let's get that out of the way. And I'm going to press my Stream Deck, and I'm going to press that button, and we should see this move up. And if I do a slightly longer press, you should see it move down. Now, one of the things I'd like to do is to stop it repeating, so that if I held my finger down, I don't really want this to repeat. So we'll put that as a no. There is no repeat section here for the long press event. You just can't do that. So we'll submit that, and so that should work now. So we've got a button working. And if only life was that simple. Because if we go and look outside, let's put some power on, let's get a battery source working. If we go and look outside at the exterior view, which we get from here, the camera, external view, and I want to choose the quick view too, so we're seeing the front of the aircraft. If I press that button now on the Stream Deck, nothing happens, no lights come on. If I go back into the cockpit, you can see that the switch has moved. That's okay. And if I move it down to taxi, let's go look external again. Nothing's working. We've got power onto it. If I go back inside and if I turn on the nav lights, you can see they're on. So we've definitely got power to it. Something else is happening. And in fact, what it is, if we go back into the cockpit, and we'll put this back to its normal position. If I use X's and O's, now let's put X's and O's. If I watch the simulator events that are going on, and we bring the events over, you can ignore these ones here that are going on. It's constantly setting some potentiometers to 100%. If I move this switch now, if I move it up to taxi, you can see that it's the BVARs have set the taxi lights and landing lights exactly as we expect them to, but it's also affected 2 potentiometers. When we're in taxi mode, potentiometer 2 is set to 100 and potentiometer 10 is set to 0. So that happens with this switch, but it's not happening with my key press. It's not being addressed through that BVAR that we used. Let's turn it to landing. And again, on landing, you can see now these are potentiometers have swapped over. Excuse me. So it's not the BVARs that control that. It's something that's in the actual mouse click on the switch. So we have to address that. So we do have to resort to, well, in my previous video I was a bit shortcutish, and I just put in 2 little lines of script so that it turned both potentiometers up to 100% and left them there. Let's try and be a bit more sophisticated and try to emulate what's really going on internally. So what we would need to do is to actually write a little bit of script on axes and O's. And I've already written the script to save you watching me typing. So in my script editor, I've got a section here called My TBM, and I've got a potentiometer, and it's going to be an automated script. So this is what the script looks like, and it's relatively simple. I hope you think anyway. We're going to read that variable, the B landing light variable. So read the B variable and compare it to 2. That's the normal down state with everything switched off, and see if they're equal. If it is equal to 2, then you set potentiometer 2 to 0. So all I've done there is I've used the insert sim event button here. So if I come down to a clear line here, I can't insert the sim variable, I've got to type that in. So I've typed in B lighting landing. For those who've never scripted before, those dots are just the space bar. You don't actually type a dot. You type the space bar, it puts the dot in, just so you can see where there are spaces. It's a visual marker. So landing lighting 2 space equals, and then you type space if, and then the curly brackets surround the whole of the if statement. And then putting into that, I would just insert the sim event. I'll be looking for potentiometer. So we apply that filter, and it's in lights, and I just want to set potentiometer 2, for instance. So we just double click on that, and you see it's already put the 1 in automatically, but I want it to go to 0. So that's how I would put that in there. Rather than typing it all in, I would select it and put it. But let's get rid of that. Okay, so if it's 2, if it's in the off state, then both of the potentiometers, both 2 and 10, are set to 0. If it's in landing light, potentiometer 2 is set to 100, and potentiometer 10 is set to 0. And if we're in landing light mode, i.e. we're in landing lighting 0, this is set to 0, and this one is set to 100. So that's the entirety of the script. If you're typing it in, don't forget actions. When you're writing to an event, you have to have the greater than sign. It's not greater than in this case. It's saying output to, but we're going to push this, input to here. We're going to push that into here to make that work. But if you do this double clicking thing here, inserting the sim event, it puts that in for you anyway. So I'm just leaving that there on the screen long enough for you to have a look at it and see what's going on. Okay, so that's the script. What we need to do is to make that script run constantly, so it's checking the state of these variables. And so we do that by making sure we're in the correct aircraft, and we assign a script to that aircraft. So it's an automated script, and I put it in the My TBM group. That's the group I made, and the only group one that's in there is the potentiometer auto script. That's what I've called it, my naming for it, and it's going to repeat. You can feel free to change that so that it does it only does it every 500 seconds or whatever you want it to do, 500 milliseconds, or you can leave it as the default. So it doesn't seem to make much difference, to be honest. So I'm going to leave that there, add it to here, and click close. So now that should be running, and you see as I change using the switch now, let's put it to 0, the potentiometers are off. If I go take it to the taxi position, potentiometer 2 is on and that is off, and let's go to the next one. So if I look at outside now, we've got power on, which I have. If I look externally, I should see the lights on. Let's take it to landing lights. Let's take it to off, and then go back through the cycle. Landing, sorry, taxi and landing. So we've now got control of the lights. So the next thing we need to do is to understand how the slider gauge actually handles the graphics. That is a button on your Stream Deck, and they are by default 144 pixels across. It's in native mode. It will rescale things, but it's just using up excess memory you don't need to use. So if you designed your graphics at 144 by 144, they fit onto the button exactly. But what a slider gauge does is that it takes a graphic which is the same width, it's 144 wide, but it's actually 3 images, one stacked on top of another. For this case, you could do other things with, but this is how we are doing this one. So it's 144 pixels across and 432 high. It's 3000 on height, and these are 3 screenshots that are put together. And I'll show you how I did it. See, I'm not a graphic artist, but I'll show you how I've worked out how to do this. But how the slider gauge works. If we slide that over, only one part of it is in the window, the rest of it is hidden, is obscured, and it uses a multiplier to work out how far to move this graphic. So if we read the variable lighting landing, if it's in landing mode, then it's the value will be 0. So we use the same multiplier all the time for this graphic, because the depth of each graphic is 144 pixels. So this says move it up 144 pixels multiplied by whatever the variable is. So it's going to be 0. It's not going to move it up at all. If we move it to taxi mode, then obviously this that variable will become 1. So it will multiply the multiplier by the indicator. Those two get multiplied together, and it's going to move it up 144 pixels, i.e. it slides up 1 notch, and now we see a different graphic in the window. If it's in the off mode, then it will return the value 2, so it will multiply 144 multiplied by 2, so it moves it up 288 pixels, and it slides it to that position there, so you can only see that graphic. So that's how the slider gauge for this one's working, because it's moving up sort of a whole frame at a time. So I'll just show you very quickly how I made the graphic. I use a program, a free program called GIMP. If I just bring that up onto here. And what I've done is I've taken 3 screenshots from the cockpit, and I've tried to take them all in exactly the same place as much as possible. So I've done a sort of snippet type thing, and I've got one in each position. So I've tried to make this as accurate as possible. So what I did was I used the guidelines around the cockpit to line it up, because I want to take 3 very, very similar graphics to put together so they look nice. Don't forget the buttons are quite small, so you don't have to be too accurate. So what I want to do now is to cut this out, to select a part of this. So I use the rectangle select from here, and I draw roughly around it, but I know I want it to be really a multiple of 144, so I'm going to make it twice the size, 288 by 288. So I know that that is an exact square now, and it's going to scale quite nicely. But I also want to put this in exactly the same position for all of 3 of my graphics. So I'm going to make note of this, but if I do 80 by 160 as its position for this particular graphic, that works quite nicely for me. So I've sort of got that, and that's what I'm going to do for, I would do that for all 3 graphics exactly the same, but I'll just do one to show you how it works. So what I would do with that is I would copy that selection, and now I would create a new one from the clipboard. So I've got an image, exactly square, and I'm going to actually scale it down to the right size just to save some memory. So I'm going to scale the image down to 144 by 144, and then I'll export that as a PNG, and you put it wherever you like to find it. Okay, so I do that 3 times. I've got 3 different images. So now I want to grow them, put them together. So let's get rid of that. Let's not have that. I'm going to start a new one, and I know that I want it to be 144 wide, and I also want it to be that 432 high. That's high enough for the 3 graphics to sit on top of each other. So we'll OK that. And what I'll do now is I'll just drag in the 3 that I've created, and I want the landing one to be on top. So this one here is the landing, and I've named it 144, so I know how big it is. And we drop that in, and I need to move that up. So over here, I'm going to right click on here and edit the attributes for this layer, and I want it to have no Y offset, so that puts that at the top. Now I will bring in from here the taxi version and drop that into place, and that will be in exactly the right place. And then the last one to bring in will be the off version, which is here. Drop that in. Of course that goes into the middle by default, so we do the same as we did before. Right hand click on here, edit that, and I want that to be offset by 288. So they're all in position, and now I can just go over to here and file, export that as a PNG, and that's the graphic done. So I hope that makes sense. So we'll just get rid of that. I've got menus coming up on another screen here which I have to discard the changes for. Okay, so that's that. So let's go back into the cockpit and bring up my slider gauge. So what do we do with that? Well, that image that I've made, I'm going to upload that into here. So the background image, upload, and it's this one here with the landing light on top. So that's in, and we'll save that. So that's in place. And what I want to do now is to read a variable. So it's the B variable, the lighting landing variable. So lighting landing 1. There isn't an X multiplier. I don't want it to go across the screen, but I do want it to go up and down the screen. So minus 144 is the multiplier, and that should be it really. So we'll submit that, and the graphics appeared. So let's go back into the cockpit so we can see what's going on. Bring Stream Deck back in. Let's put that, yeah, put it there so we can see what's going on. And if I press the button now, you should see both the graphic here moving up and the graphic here moving up. And do the same again. It's like slid the graphic up. Let's do the long press, down and down. So that's it. We've now got a working button, working gauge. We've used an auto script to make sure the potentiometers are working. Like really, that's it. That's all you need to do for that. So I suppose the hardest work is finding a graphics package that you're happy with. If you're like me, I'm not really into graphics particularly, but I found a method that's working for me using that free piece of software called GIMP. I would suggest Googling for GIMP is probably interesting. So GIMP.org is where you can download that from. It's a well-established piece of freeware. There are versions for it for Linux, for all sorts of different operating systems. Totally safe. Been around for years and years. I'm not into graphic artists work. I find it very complex, and I've just learnt a few tricks with it. Okay, I hope that works for you, and I will see you in the next video. Not quite sure what it's going to be. I'm tempted to give the TBM a good workout and try to do a whole series on that. Or it might be going to some of the other more general aviation ones. Now I've got my honeycomb yoke and throttle quadrant. See if I get some of those working. Okay, I'll see you in the next one.